final station in the terms of this is how far really a big chunk of the contamination really came down straight from Butte. There were, of course, further, again, hundreds of miles where they still detected some contamination, but because of the Milltown Dam that was built in 1907, most of it was captured behind the dam. So in a way, it was a catastrophic event, especially for the guy who built it, who let it build, William Clark. You saw his picture and you could read his story. They didn't like it, but it saved the rest of the river from getting as contaminated as it is up from here. So basically, it's very interesting that the Milltown Dam kind of got some priorities as for the cleanup, and you might wonder why was that? Why didn't they clean up first the parotailing and stuff like that? Because it's, it would make more sense to just take out the source of the contamination before you would do something downwards. We will talk about that. But just really quickly the story. So the dam was built. William Clark, one of the copper kings, had a lot of money. He just wanted to have this dam down here. Actually, we were wondering where it was. And those rocks, kind of a line of rocks going to the water, that was approximately where that the powerhouse was, and then it actually went across. You see the rocks kind of laid in a line in the water. So that we suppose it is. You can kind of just detect it back. The purpose of the whole dam was he actually had a mill, a lumber mill that is in Bonner here. So behind that white colored building, there's still lumber yard there. So he needed electricity. Hey guys, come, we just started. I thought you were there. We just followed the GPS. I didn't know exactly how to come, but we followed it. Okay, come closer. So the dam was built, it was brand new, and basically the year after there was a 100-year flood, which brought a lot of, I'm not quite sure with CFSs, but it was scary, and it was so quick and so powerful that a lot of the sediments and a lot of the contaminated tailings really came down here, filling it up so that it was basically, it kind of ruined it in the beginning. And basically nothing much happened up till the 1980s, when people started to detect arsenic in their wells. So the people in Bonner, they just used the groundwater, and I don't know if they got sick or there was something that it's really noisy here. In Butte it was much better, right? We didn't hear any noises like this.
I think it's a massacre.
Yeah, I know. But so they started to really show that there is elevated arsenic in these people's wells, and they were drinking it. So something must have been done. Something was coming, and basically with Superfund, they actually received pretty quickly an aid, and they started to work on it. But as you see, basically nothing much happened when in the 80s when they showed it. And then if you go further in timeline, 1996, the study of possible cleanup, basically in the mid 1990s, they kind of still were just on how to clean this whole mess up. And I think in 2004 when they actually got the money to remove all that contaminated waste. And that was actually encouraged by several factors. First off, the arsenic levels in the well. Then in 1996, I think the bull trout came on a protected species list, and basically the dam was a complete barrier for the species to migrate up where it was breeding before. And then the 10,000 plus commons from the town of Missoula, which helped to move this whole thing forward. And basically after 2004, they actually had this huge interdisciplinary designing team of many people, and the work basically started from 2007 and up till 2013 or something like that. But basically in 2008 and 9 they removed the dam. So the powerhouse and the whole dam was removed, and it needed to be, that was at that time the biggest dam removal in the United States. Now it's only the second. There is one that they removed not long ago in 2012, I guess, or 13, somewhere else in the country. But usually how they remove these dams, it's much quicker than here, because they usually don't deal with sediments, contaminated sediments behind it, so they just blow it up and, you know, things just get in their place. But here they needed to be really careful. So when they actually were removing the dam, after that they needed to right away think of putting the Clark Fork in a different channel. So you can still see kind of the dam or the levee near the highway, that berm that is grassy. That was basically that side channel or bypass channel where they rerouted Clark Fork during the time for the cleanup. So for years basically the Clark Fork, the original channel, didn't get any water, just ran through basically here, and they were cleaning it up. And I have there is actually pictures, if we move a little further, on how that whole thing happened. So you can see all these here. That's basically showing the situation down there. It was millions of cubic yards of tailings that was removed from here, and most of it, at least 90%, went up to Opportunity. They even built a little part track of the railway to actually right away be able with the bulldozers to put the sediment on the trains, and they right away went up to Opportunity. There are a couple of other sites, I'm not quite sure, but they had some local, 2 or 3 local repositories where they didn't bring everything away, but they put it maybe under the parking lot, whatever, I'm not quite sure, but they have some. Okay, so it was removed from here, and you can see the timelines. They actually were working pretty quickly. And here they try to remove as much as they can, but still we know it's not 100% of the removal. They brought back new dirt. They actually, again, just designed the whole floodplain. They put a lot of different features in. As you see, there is a meandering creek. So by removing all the tailings, they were able to identify the old channel of the river, and they saw the old sediments, the old willows, and everything that was covered. And very interestingly, I actually have a picture on that. Oops. This guy. So this was, I don't think that picture is out here. This was one of our speakers, Giles Tellen, and he was actually included when they actually find that original channel. Basically what they recovered, which is still visible. If you look down there, there is trunks of trees. And that was from the time when actually all that sediment in 1908 covered the floodplain. And basically these are kind of almost fossils, we should say, like over 100-year-old trunks, and everything below that was there, and people were wondering, is there anything that we could use from here? Are things, seeds or plant material alive? And long story short, basically the next year, they didn't finish everything. There was a lot of sprouting little willows and lots of plants coming up. So the seed bank was basically preserved under that contaminated layer. It's a fantastic story, and basically what you can see from that remaining, you can see all the trunks, but there's those willows. Really, just on the right of the meandering creek, there is that big island of willows. Basically, they came up, and they're from basically 100-year-old seed bank, just were recovering. So I need to mention here, with the whole cleanup process, they had different purposes. They actually put them into nice categories. They call them the 3 R's. So what they did here, first off, they remediated the site, which would mean what? You know now what remediation is. So what did they do? They just removed all the contaminated waste and took it away, and that was also including the dam. So that was the remediation part of it. And after that, it was restoration. So right after remediation, they started restoration. So they tried to put back the original communities of the floodplain. It is, we can talk about first of plant communities, but also they were focusing or trying to target different habitats for wildlife. And the last R is the I would call it repurposing, which is basically that was a toxic area here, and now they built a state park. There is fishing access down there. You can see that parking lot. There are people able to go down, bring their boats down. You can actually go, we will actually take a little walk. You can go down to the river, and you can just enjoy and learn about the story of that success of restoration. So these are the 3 R's. All the different things cost millions and millions of dollars. I think restoration was the cheapest part of it. So remediation was the most expensive part, to remove all the sediments and the contaminated waste. And then the repurposing was kind of the second most expensive, by building up all these infrastructure here. Okay, so how they did this whole thing with restoration, because that's our restoration class. So as I said, they built that site or bypass channel, and they dug up everything, they brought back new dirt, but they really took care of whatever they could save and salvage from the original material. They did. So they were really trying to look at the hydrology of the site. They tried to look at what plant materials they found. They really were careful how much soil they actually transport in here, because they knew that they can overdo it. You can actually just a couple of feet, if you rise the floodplain a couple of feet higher than it should be, you ruin it. You actually will create a more dry situation that you want. And basically that grass down there, the dry grass, it's not really how it should be, I guess, many times. Maybe they actually had more dirt brought in there that they should have. We will take a closer look at that. They actually put in like 200,000 willow cuttings. They did soil lifts. They did actually also the rough and loose treatments. They actually created these side ponds for habitat for amphibians or reptiles, whatever can actually take their birds. So this is all included in their plan. But basically what made it, restoration finished, I think in 2000, like the building of it finished in 2010, and in 2011 they got a 10-year flood, and in 2012 they got a 30-year flood, which resulted like 6,000 psi waters, and the water hanging out of the channel for 6 weeks, so you couldn't tell really what was going on. That was, they thought, a big disaster, because that big amount of water started to ruin the structures they built. They did put in, as I said, hundreds of thousands of plants. They seeded in, they planted in, and they just saw that this is going to be a catastrophe. But basically the season after, right, as it started to warm up, what they started to see was kind of a wonder, because that flood actually helped to bring in all the propagule, so hundreds of willows and cottonwoods started to germinate and repopulate all the area above. So they said that was one of the best things that could have happened. One thing that happened, and they didn't expect it, that you can see that S, and basically kind of the S is curved, it's cut over. You can see water kind of in like pools. So it was that 2012 flood resulted an extra channel, a shortcut in the meandering design. They didn't like that. They thought it was just a really quick action from the river, from the dynamics of the river. So they applied adaptive management, meaning that your design is flexible to change. As you see how things are developing, how things are evolving, you are allowed to actually make changes. So they decided to put back floodplain, and now it's, as I say, it almost looks like it's little ponds there, but basically the river before, we know it made a shortcut there that wouldn't have been good for the overall outcome. So now, after 2012, I think that's the last, is it 2012 there, the last year? 2012, yeah. So after 2012, what happened out here, they only are, after building the park and everything, they're not interfering in here. That's, as I right away see that, to me this is a fantastic outcome. As I remember, I mean, you can see pictures, it looked like this or this in 2008 and 9. It was terrible looking. But today, you know, I think for an untrained eye, this would be something that, well, this is, you know, this is just as an untouched feature as it was. So how did they start restoration? Because restoration, the end goal of the restoration is still not achieved. They would like to actually achieve a later successional phase of the vegetation. And you notice probably by coming from Butte that the vegetation really changed. The landscape changed. We actually dropped in elevation a lot. You maybe experience it's a little warmer here. Maybe now it warmed up in Butte too. But what you actually see a lot, there's a lot of ponderosa pines. So those are ponderosa pines. They have much longer needles, those 4 or 5 plants there. And those pines, the ponderosa pines, have 3 needles actually. That's a really important thing of it. They actually go down to the floodplain after the succession ends a couple of 100 years. The end result would be kind of a cottonwood, ponderosa pine, dogwood mixture of a vegetation. So basically how they created the whole thing, they looked at the end goal, what they would like to achieve, let's say in 100 years, and what steps do they need to do to achieve that. That is called backcasting, and for that they really started up with the oldest successional phases. So basically the willows and the cottonwoods are earlier successional stages of this end goal, and they're getting there slowly. But you know, their main species is not yet on the floodplain. I must tell you that all those trunks, the big trunks that actually remained, that I'm showing here, they're all ponderosa pines. So they kind of had an easy job to determine what was there before. Not like sometimes we in Butte, we say, well, we would like to achieve something on the hill and we should go somehow that way. We don't really have good results. Everything, a lot of things actually got ruined there, so we don't really have things to reach back to. These guys were really lucky to identify right away a vegetation, kind of a later successional stage of the vegetation that they would like to target. For them to be able to see how that work is ongoing, they need to monitor it. So they monitored right after the first year, they monitored after the second year, and they will monitor in the 5th year, and they will monitor in the 7th and the 10th, and maybe after that the 15th or 20th. So they would like to see. The problem is that there is not really money left in the pocket from the Superfund money to do that. So usually it's scientists and grants doing it with students. So last year we had Cara Nelson, who will be our speaker next week in the restoration seminar, and she went to New York. She would have been a nice host to us today, but in the last minutes she canceled. So she told us last year that she's doing student projects down here and estimates the outcomes, you know, how do they getting towards the final goal. And basically what EPA right away says that they need to achieve, their goal is to achieve 90% of a plant cover. So if you look behind you, probably you will see 90% plant cover, but on a floodplain, many times a 90% plant cover is a little more than you would think. And somebody knows what do we need to achieve in Butte as a plant cover, as EPA requests kind of us to do that, because otherwise our sites are failing. Just guess a percentage. A little less, 60. So on the dry hills of Butte, we need to achieve 60%. And I must tell you, the natural vegetation maybe sometimes is 40, maybe it's, in the good cases, it achieves 50%. So we need to replace something there, or with restoration, kind of, we need to achieve something that was not there before. That's not good, but they actually just have a number in their mind. And here it's 90%, which is also a little higher than you would want. What they also do, they spend some money for invasive plant management, because again, as I told you, and Rich Rogers tells you, that you will have problems probably with invasive plants because it's a freshly disturbed site. So the first things that can actually really take over these sites many times are invaders. If the succession, or if your soil source or something is not working right, or there is, for example, from Butte coming down seeds of invasive plants and they just are deposited in the floodplain. We don't want that. Okay, that's what came in my mind right now. Up here you can ask questions, but slowly I would like to actually request us to go down to the river, and there we talk for another 10 minutes and then we'll finish. But please ask questions if you have right now questions. No one? Okay.